Welcome back to Utopia. You know, Utah is the second driest state in the U.S., with most of that precipitation happening in the winter months. This means runoff from melting mountain snow usually reaches a peak in April, May, and early June, making it the perfect time to float down a river. Come along now as we float into Labyrinth Canyon, just north of Canyonlands National Park.
For a place as dry as Utah, there seems to be no end to the adventures one can have out on the water. From the lakes and reservoirs to the rivers and waterfalls, Utah provides no lack of opportunities for recreating off terra firma. Today, we float down the Green River into Labyrinth Canyon, just north of Canyonlands National Park, a red rock adventure that exemplifies the natural beauty and sublime geology of the state of Utah. This is not the thrill seeker's river trip, but more a relaxing and meditative drift downstream. We begin our 4-day float at Ruby Ranch, which sits just across from where the San Rafael River joins the Green. Just south of Interstate 70 and the town of Green River, Ruby Ranch is private property, so please follow all the landowner's rules for the put-in. We'll take out at Mineral Bottom, just north of the border to Canyonlands National Park. The total length of our float is about 48 miles. This is all still water, so if we want to be done in 4 days, we need to actively paddle much of the time, especially when the wind picks up. Now, because we are on BLM land for this entire trip, dogs, of course, are welcome. It's the beginning of June when we're making this trip. The river, though, can be floated all year, but the waters slow down as spring turns to summer and summer turns into fall. Then, in the winter months, the water is low and navigating through shallows becomes much more difficult. The desert may seem barren, but not near the rivers. Called riparian habitat, from the Latin ripari, meaning frequents riverbanks, the riparian zones are the lush belts of vegetation found along the surface waters. Here on the Green River, the vegetation includes tamarisk, willows, and the occasional stand of oak trees. Nearly 100 different non-native plants have been documented in this area, which include the invasive tamarisk, which clog entrances to side canyons and choke shorelines. The tamarisk brush makes it difficult to identify camping spots without first exploring by foot. Turns out the toughest part of this trip is unloading the boats each afternoon and then loading the boats each morning. The steep banks of the river leading to the campgrounds with deep drop-offs and swift currents make landing and offloading difficult. Camps can be established on sandbars, but these exposed areas offer less shade. Shade, one of the most important attributes to any trip down any Utah river in summertime. We wake to the sound of very active and boisterous birds. Reviewing the map indicates a 13-mile first day. Not bad, but the pace must be continued to take us the 48 miles over a 4-day stretch. The winds have picked up on day 2, causing the large rafts to struggle against competing forces. Great blue herons follow along, hunting in the shallows. There are rookeries all along the stretch of the river. 273 species of birds. That's right, 273 have been documented here, including seasonal and year-round residents. Beavers are common along this stretch of the river, And since these waterways are too large to dam, the beavers live in dens dug into the riverbanks. The sound of a distant train coming closer is revealed to be actually a cove filled with bugs whose collective buzzing roars like an approaching locomotive. Steering away from the riverbank alleviates that threat. The strangely infrequent sandbars and beaches are a welcome respite from the dozens of hours in that seat out on the raft, and our crew takes every opportunity to stop and play. On day 2, we put in about 17 miles despite the stiff winds. As we unpack and camp the second night, everyone hopes for less wind the next day. There is something about a river that brings people together in a way that acts as a reminder of just how those early pioneers depended upon each other and how this dependence wasn't a crutch but a crucible. The coming together with common goals, carrying gear, making meals, or just keeping an eye on a kid that's not yours, all contribute to a sense of love and community, rarely found these days in the non-river world. Day 3 provides the perfect floating weather, very light and intermittent zephyrs. The temperature dropped from the high to low 90s, and the river seemingly faster with the lack of willful winds. The calm waters propel the children onto their own personal watercrafts, and the joy is palpable. Freedom from the constraints of the rafts and their parents' hovering eyes causes confidence to bubble among these kids. This is an adventure that few of their peers will experience, the proud parents partaking in this rare rite of passage. The scattered boats are tied together to create a flotilla of fun, and the occasional oar stroke just enough to maneuver the barge away from the banks. And soon, the sun descends upon our final night of this trip after putting in another 15 miles. That leaves only 3 to 4 miles for our final day. As we take down the tents and pack up our boats for our last day of floating, no one seems to be in any sort of a rush to get back to civilization. So one final stop is made on a glorious sandbar a mile or two just before the takeout. And when a water fight ensues, even the adults join in and quickly revert to kids themselves. If these moments weren't captured on camera, it might seem like it was part of a dream. But this was real, and a reminder that it's the people, not just the place, that make life so special. Upon returning to the real world and hearing about current events, most everything that transpired while we were away seems hardly to matter, putting clutter definitely in its place, hoping that peace of mind can be sustained by a return trip to the rivers in this special place we call Utopia.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of Utopia. Each week, we put our best efforts to entertain and elucidate, and we hope you will feel inspired to instigate your own adventure. If you've missed any of our past adventures, you can visit us online at utopiatvseries.com. And please remember, we don't inherit the earth from our parents, we borrow it from our children.